Hello. Hello. Howdy. All sorts of ways to greet people who I can't see because A, you're not here at the time I'm recording, and B, you're not here. So, I'm going to do something I didn't plan on doing, but which come upon me. I don't know if I have ever mentioned it anywhere in any of my videos, but I have a rotation. You know, people who have 300 bottles or whatever, they go to whatever the mood strikes them. If they tried to go through it from beginning to end, it would take who knows how long. At most, I'm going to have 20 bottles on hand. I don't have the storage space for more. And so I put them all in a randomizer, shake them up, make sure that I'm not going to be drinking two from the same distillery in a row, that kind of thing. And then I start at the beginning, go to the end, redo it. Start at the beginning, go to the end, redo it. Well, the way this current rotation worked out, I made a review last night, and I'm going to make a review tonight. Totally unplanned. I don't suppose it's going to happen much, if any, in the future. But tonight, one of the prettiest bottles on earth is from this distillery. All their bottles are beautiful. This is Sagamore Spirit. Let me shove it right up to the camera for you. Sagamore Spirit Double Oak. Now the label's kind of weird because of the, don't ask me because of, has Double Oak here, then Sagamore, even though the name of the place is Sagamore Spirit. Let me turn so you can see. Double Oak across the top, Sagamore, then rye. Now, I'm a bourbon guy, but I like rye now and then. It says American whiskey there on the bottom chevron. And then down here, it says a blend of straight rye whiskeys. It's 96.6 proof. For those of you who think in terms of alcohol by volume, that is 48.3%. Innovative wave stave barrel finishing. Now what that means is it's double oak. I already mentioned that. So they aged it in one barrel according to the rules of rye whiskey. And I'm going to get to where the whiskey comes from here directly. Then they put it in a second barrel, except instead of just being a straight curve, as barrel staves are, they did this to the inside surface so it's wavy, giving more surface area in that second barrel for the whiskey to interact with. Quality ensured from grain to glass. Grain to glass is one of those phrases that really is meaningless, but it's a big fad. Everybody wants grain to glass. What does that mean? It means you take the grain, you grind it, you mash it in, you ferment it, you distill it, you age it, you put it in the bottle, you sell it. Everybody's doing it. Everybody has always done it. But all of a sudden, oh, we're grain to glass. And people get the impression that the distiller is growing his own grain, and he ain't. In most cases. Frey Ranch does. Offhand, I cannot think of another distiller which grows its own grain. But they're all saying grain to glass because that's exactly what a distiller does by definition. He takes the grain, puts it through the process, eventually it gets into the bottle. This is batch 8 AT, Alpha Tango, bottle 1776. You know, you have enough bottles, sooner or later you're going to hit that number, but it's still fun. Hand bottled by DW. I know that was not Darrell Waltrip, but that's, to me, that's who old DW is. Now here on the back we have sales stuff. Sagamore Spirit Core Collection. Aged in new charred oak barrels, distilled in Maryland and Indiana. That is why it doesn't say it's straight rye whiskey, but a blend of straight rye whiskeys. And that's definitely why it doesn't say Maryland. Now, Sagamore Spirit does have their own distillery, but apparently they're still getting at least some of their whiskey from MGP in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Gluten-free. Who flippin' cares? If you want to go to their website, it's sagamorespirit.com. Has a government warning. This I got on the 15th of September at Total Wine. Cost me $63.99. It wasn't that long ago. I could never afford a bottle that much, and I still don't buy them on a routine basis, but now I can sometimes. Got a little bit more in there than I wanted, but it's not a problem. Now, if you have seen, what was it? Oh, if you've seen the review I did last night on the Four Roses Single Barrel OBSF, I mentioned that I had prepared a whiskey tasting sheet. There it is. No big deal. I'm not going to go over it unless somebody wants me to. And there is the comment section for you to say what you like, dislike, what you'd like to know that I haven't covered, all that kind of thing. I also mentioned that I do have a rating scale, which I didn't have with me at the time. I have scribbled it out. If all it took to be a doctor was per handwriting, I would be the greatest doctor on the face of the earth. On the planet. Whatever happened to in the world? On earth. You know, let's speak English. Let's not pontificate and pompousize. So when we come to it, this is the scale I'll be using. I'll tell you what rating I give it at the time. Now, what proof was this? It was 96.6 proof, which, while not low proof, is not conspicuously high. It is double oak, as I've mentioned, which means it aged in one barrel and then finished briefly, a few months probably, in another. I have not looked up the mash bills, plural, because it's both Indiana and Maryland. I have not looked up the age, something else I was trying to think of. I do know there's not an age statement on here, so I won't worry about that. Now, when I take my first sniff, I get two things. One is smokiness. The other is wryness. Now, to me, a rye whiskey, if it's something that I call emphatically rye, or a straightforward rye, or an unabashed rye, depending on my mood, a rye that makes no bones about being a rye gives me two main characteristics. One is a vegetal note, makes me think of the thick, hairy leaves of a mullein. When I was a kid up in Washington, we'd find dried dried mullein and the stalk would still be setting upright. We'd pull them off and play sword fight with them. It also gives me a mineral note. And rye does this both on the nose and the palate. And I'll get to more of both later as I go along. But I'm getting those two things from this nose. I'm also getting smokiness. Now that will come from the second barrel. After the whiskey has aged however many years, they are at least 4 years old. Both of these straight whiskeys, both from Sagamore and MGP. And the reason I know that is that to be a straight whiskey, it has to be at least 2 years old. But if it's between 2 and 4, it has to have an age statement. And there isn't one on this bottle, so it's at least 4 years old. And as dark as it is, well, that's not necessarily an indicator here, because they aged it however long in the original barrel, then they put it into a new barrel, unused barrel, and the whiskey was able to rapidly pick up yet more flavor and yet more color that it would not have gotten until it had been in the original barrel a fair amount longer. So it's got that smokiness from the fresh charcoal of the new barrel. Has those two rye characteristics. Maybe a slight corn sweetness underneath all that. The smoke and the rye are definitely the main notes, the dominant notes. And so when I say corn sweetness, first, without knowing the mash bill, I don't even know if there's corn in here. There are ryes that don't have any corn in them at all. But there is something sweet under there, and it makes me think of corn. There's some cinnamon spiciness, some brown sugar, and those would come from the barrel. And by the way, if you've watched whiskey channels, you've probably seen people doing this. Now, if both your nostrils will serve you, you do want to use both. So, as you can see, I'm not moving my head much, I'm not moving the glass much. Both nostrils are already here. There's no need for the swinging thing like one of them carnival rides. Also, you want to keep your mouth slightly open. You don't need to go, but you know, about like this. You know, just enough that it's open, because that way you get more circulation of the aroma through your head. There's a little bit of honey coming through now. That's about all I'm getting on this. And it's not that there's nothing else there. It's that, as I've said, the smokiness and the ryeness are so prominent that they kind of subsume everything else into the overall nose. That's a creamy mouthfeel. Almost buttery, but not quite to that level of viscosity. And although that first sip is for mouthfeel, not taste, there was something definitely sweet on that sip. And I keep sniffing throughout a glass, partly just because I enjoy it, and partly because once you've got it on your tongue, you can often detect more on the nose, and as you keep sniffing, you can often detect more on the palate. But in this case, I'm not getting anything new there. The first two things I got on that sip, which was my first palate sip, my first flavor sip, there was honey, and then it didn't taste like this, but it gave the sensation of cool spring water. And I remember the first time I ever got that note, the spring water note, I don't remember whether it was rye or bourbon, but it was Bullet. And Bullet uses a high rye mash bill, a lot of rye in their bourbon. And at least at the time, and I would presume still, even though they're now distilling their own rye whiskey, at the time they were using the MGP 95.5 mash bill, 95% rye, 5% sprouted barley. And I can't remember for sure. I've not tried to store this in my head, and if I had, it would fall through. I have a mind like a steel sieve. But it seems to me, my impression is, of my experience, that I tend to get, if I'm going to get the cool spring water at all, I tend to get it when there's a lot of rye involved. Now I'm getting, in addition to the smoke, an actual woody note, kind of like in a lumber yard. You know how good a lumber yard smells with all that fresh lumber laying around? And my experiences with lumber yards are mostly before the treated stuff come in, before they started chemically treating the wood to keep it preserved longer. And so that smell of fresh lumber is something else. Or if you're working with somebody in who's doing wood, I helped my dad, I don't know how many times, when he was a sawing and a nailing, and he insisted that everything be square and plumb. I didn't get the cool spring water on that sip, but I got the honey, I got cinnamon, I got brown sugar in spades, both of those. As I continued to move the whiskey around in my mouth, some oakiness come in along with the smokiness. It began to slightly be chocolate. Oak does that for me. It very frequently turns into chocolate. And the reason I know it's the oak turning into chocolate is I almost never get chocolate except when I've first gotten oak. And it's weird to think that a wood taste can be pleasant, but as long as there's not too much oak, it is. I've only had one whiskey, and I don't remember what it was now. It was something that I tried and won't do again. But I've only had one whiskey which was so oaky I could taste the tannin. It's like when you make your tea too strong. On the nose now, I'm still getting everything else I've talked about, but that mineral note, what I call a granite dust note, is coming to the fore. In addition to whatever else I've said about the palate, also I was getting some just downright sugar sweetness. Not a lot, not cloying by any means, but it was coming in and complementing everything else, the spiciness, the smokiness. This is a complex whiskey. You can see how far down I am in the bottle, and I'm still sorting it out. It might take me several bottles to sort out. I may never get at all the complexity that's here. I'll be honest, I don't have the best palate on earth. It serves me, and practice has improved it, and hopefully still is, but it's not the most refined palate, the most competent palate. Now, that's not quite the word I want. Capable palate. I just can't always get everything out of something that I wished I could. Okay, now for a finish sip. At first, there's just the alcohol, then in comes the mineral and the vegetal, then comes definite oak. There's a little bit of red pepper in all this. The oak is now becoming more prominent, and it's turning to semi-sweet chocolate. I can almost feel the graininess of the chocolate. And chocolate has a very fine grain if it's any good at all. But I can kind of feel the graininess of the chocolate. And right along in here, I'm still getting oak. And I can feel the hug now. There's that chocolate, the semi-sweet chocolate and the oak mingled. And I didn't notice, I have to go like that to see the timer. Otherwise it blends into the background. I didn't look at the timer to see when I swallowed, but that finish is still going. It's still oak, and the chocolate's beginning to fade, but it's still there. The oak is definitely still there. So this is a long finish. I'm tempted to say this is a blank whiskey, but I'll get to the rating here in a second. First, the summary. If you like a whiskey that has a lot of smoke to it, that definitely has oak to it, if you like a whiskey which is absolutely unashamed of being a rye whiskey, if you like something dark and assertive and dense and bold, then I highly recommend this. If that's not your style, then you might shy away from it. You might shy away from Sagamore Spirit altogether. I've only had 3 of their bottles. This one, their regular, and their cask strength, all of them have been bold, dense, assertive, proud to be what they are. And if you are into something more subtle, more, well, the word that I can't think of a word to complement subtle. Not timid. I have a really good working vocabulary, but sometimes the gates in here just won't open and let the word out. And that's what I've got here. So it is a great whiskey. I highly recommend it to you if you like that kind of a whiskey. Now, as I said, it is $64. If you're new to whiskey, you might not want to spend $64 on a bottle of whiskey. If you don't yet know what your palate is like, what profile you prefer, you might want to shy away from this. If you can find a pint bottle of this or another Sagamore, that might be the way to go. But I'd be willing to buy this whiskey if it was $10 higher, if it was $73. So how do I rate this? I have 8 levels on the scale, 1 at the bottom, 8 at the top. And I'm going to give this the highest rating, 8. Mighty fine. That is a 5-star rating if you go by stars. It's 100%, 100 out of 100 if that's how you think of things, 10 out of 10 if that's how you think of things. This receives from me the highest rating I can give it. Now, if your palate is different from mine, as I say, if you like things a little tamer, a little more subtle, a little less standing right up in your face and saying, here I am, deal with it. If you don't care for that, then you might not rate it as high as I do. Every palate's different. But I do rate it that high. I am at 26 minutes and just passing, longer than I intended to be. But I could rave on this whiskey for a long, long time. And so, I think I'll just go with my Southern Hick toast. Yeehaw.